For centuries, the vast grasslands of Mongolia remained untouched by great empires. While civilizations built walled cities, towering palaces, and sprawling trade networks, the Mongolian steppes remained home to scattered tribes of nomads. They had no grand cities, no permanent dwellings, no written history. Yet, from these seemingly humble origins, the Mongols would rise to forge one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. Their warriors would storm through cities, crush kingdoms, and shatter empires from China to Europe. But before the Mongols could conquer the world, they first had to conquer themselves. This is the beginning of their story, a tale of hardship, survival, and the rise of a leader who would change history. Before the Mongols became an empire, they were nomads, moving with the seasons, the rivers, and the grasslands. They had no fixed homes, only portable tents called yurts, covered in thick wool to protect them from the harsh Mongolian winds. They survived by herding livestock, horses, sheep, goats, and cattle, constantly moving to find fresh pastures. They lived in tight-knit clans, ruled by tribal leaders known as Khans. Life on the Mongolian steppes was brutal and unforgiving. The land itself was harsh and relentless. Winters were long, bitterly cold, and deadly, with temperatures dropping to 40 degrees C, freezing entire rivers and turning the land into an icy wasteland. Summers were equally harsh, with scorching heat and dry winds that stripped the land of vegetation. Fierce storms swept across the plains, bringing either deadly blizzards or burning dust storms. But the greatest danger was not the land, it was other tribes. Raids were common, with rival clans fighting over grazing lands, horses, and cattle. Thieves and renegades roamed the steppes, attacking settlements, stealing livestock, and even kidnapping women and children. Warfare was a way of life, and the Mongols had to be strong, fast, and relentless to survive. From the moment they could walk, Mongol children were trained in archery, horse riding, and survival. By the age of 5, a child could ride a horse on their own. By 10, they could hunt with a bow and arrow. By their teenage years, they were already fighting in battles alongside their father. The Mongols were being forged in fire, hardened by hunger, war, and the endless struggle for survival. This was the world that would give birth to Genghis Khan. The importance of horses. The Mongols were more than just nomads. They were a nation of horsemen. Mongolian horses were small but incredibly strong, capable of running long distances without tiring. A Mongol warrior could ride for days, switching between 3 or 4 different horses to keep them fresh. Even in sleep, they could stay on their horses, resting in the saddle while their mounts kept moving. To the Mongols, horses were everything. Their wealth was measured in the number of horses they owned. Their survival depended on them for food, transport, and warfare. Their warfare tactics revolved around speed, mobility, and precision. A Mongol warrior could shoot arrows with deadly accuracy, even at full gallop. They used a special composite bow, reinforced with animal horn and tendons, giving it incredible range and power. Unlike larger bows used in Europe, this Mongolian bow was compact and efficient, allowing warriors to fire even while riding at high speeds. But it wasn't just the weapons that made the Mongols powerful, it was their tactics. They mastered the art of hit-and-run warfare, striking fast, vanishing into the steppes, and returning before their enemies could react. No army in the world could match their speed or endurance. This was the secret to their future conquest. The divided tribes of Mongolia. Despite their incredible skill as warriors, the Mongols remained divided for centuries. Dozens of different tribes roamed the steppes, each with its own leader. They fought constantly over grazing lands, horses, and resources. The Chinese dynasties to the south saw them as nothing more than unruly barbarians, dangerous but never a real threat. The powerful Jin dynasty of China knew that the Mongols were too busy fighting each other to ever become a serious enemy. So they exploited these divisions. They bribed certain Mongol tribes, giving them gold and weapons to fight against their rivals. They played one tribe against another, keeping them weak and constantly at war. As long as the Mongols remained scattered and divided, they could never challenge China's power. For centuries this strategy worked. The Mongols remained little more than raiders, attacking trade caravans and border towns, but never forming a true empire. That was until the rise of one man, a man who would unite the warring tribes, a man who would turn the scattered Mongol clans into a single unstoppable force. His name was Temujin. History would remember him as Genghis Khan. The birth of Genghis Khan. In the year 1162, in the heart of the Mongolian steppes, a child was born into a struggling Mongol tribe. His name was Temujin. His father was a tribal chieftain, but his family was not powerful. His people were poor, struggling for survival. He was born into a world of chaos, where life was a constant battle. At the age of 9, tragedy struck. His father was poisoned by a rival tribe. Temujin and his family were abandoned by their own people, left with no food, no allies and no protection. They were forced to scavenge for survival. For years the young Temujin lived as an outcast, learning to hunt, fight, and survive in the wilderness. In the harsh, unforgiving steppes of Mongolia, where survival meant strength, cunning, and resilience, a young warrior was about to change history forever. His father was murdered, his people abandoned him, he was left to starve, suffer and fight for survival. Yet through the darkest of trials he endured. His name was Temujin, and he would rise to become the most feared conqueror the world had ever seen. This is the story of his rise to power, a journey of revenge, ambition and the birth of an empire. The orphan of the steppes. The Mongolian steppes had seen many warriors, but few had suffered as Temujin did. Born into the Borjigin clan in 1162, his father was Yusuge, a respected Mongol chieftain. Yusuge had arranged a political marriage for his son, promising the young Temujin to Berte, a girl from the Angirat tribe. This alliance was meant to secure power and allies, ensuring Temujin's future as a leader. But fate had other plans. On the journey back from delivering Temujin to his wife's tribe, Yusuge was poisoned by rival Tatars. Without their leader, his tribe collapsed into disarray. Temujin, still a boy, lost everything overnight. His own people abandoned him, his mother and his siblings, leaving them to die in the wilderness. Without food or shelter, they survived by hunting small animals, gathering roots and drinking melted snow. But even in hardship, Temujin's mother instilled one unshakable lesson: you are not defeated until you give up. The young boy listened, and he never gave up. The warrior's awakening. Temujin's childhood was defined by struggle. At the age of 10, he killed his older half-brother in a dispute over food, proving that he would not be controlled. As a teenager, he was captured by a rival tribe and held as a slave, but he managed to escape by killing his captor. With each hardship, he became stronger, more ruthless, and more determined. But he needed allies. One of his earliest friendships would become one of the most important in Mongol history: Jamuka, a childhood friend, skilled warrior and fellow Mongol noble. Together they pledged brotherhood, or anda, vowing to fight side by side. With Jamuka's help, Temujin began gathering a small band of warriors. Yet friendship in the Mongol steppes was as fragile as the winds. As Temujin grew stronger, so did the jealousy of rival Mongol lords. And soon, brotherhood would turn to war, uniting the Mongol tribes. The Mongols had been divided for centuries, scattered tribes warring over grazing lands, horses and resources. Temujin was determined to unite them, but he didn't just want to rule like the Khans before him. He wanted to change the very structure of Mongol society. A new system of leadership. Traditionally, Mongol leaders ruled based on bloodline. Power was passed down through noble families, with loyalty owed to one's clan. Temujin rejected this system. Instead, he promoted warriors based on merit, skill, and loyalty, rather than noble birth. If a man fought bravely, he was rewarded with rank and wealth, no matter his background. If a commander failed in battle, he was punished, even if he was of noble blood. He introduced a strict code of discipline. Loyalty was absolute, and desertion was punishable by death. For the first time, Mongol warriors were united by something greater than tribal ties. They were fighting for a cause. This radical approach attracted thousands of warriors, eager to rise through the ranks, but it also earned him powerful enemies. The rivalry with Jamuka. As Temujin's influence grew, his old friend Jamuka became his greatest rival. Jamuka, a traditional Mongol noble, saw Temujin's rise as a threat to the old ways. He gathered over 30,000 warriors from the Mongol aristocracy. In 1186, He declared himself the Gur Khan, supreme ruler of all Mongols. Temujin had no choice but to challenge him for dominance. The Battle of Dalan Balshut, in 1187 was a brutal struggle for control. Temujin's tactics were unmatched, but he was still outnumbered. After fierce fighting, his forces were defeated, but it was what happened next that shocked history. Jamuka, furious at those who had sided with Temujin, carried out a mass execution of 5,000 prisoners, boiling them alive or beheading them. This horrific act of cruelty backfired. Many Mongol tribes, disgusted by Jamuka's brutality, turned against him. Temujin escaped and slowly rebuilt his army, attracting more warriors who saw him as a just and honorable leader. This defeat was not the end, it was only the beginning of his legendary comeback, the final victory over Jamuka. For the next 10 years Temujin carefully built his forces, forging alliances and mastering the art of Mongol warfare. By 1204 he was ready for a final confrontation. This time, Temujin had the larger army, over 80,000. His generals outmaneuvered Jamuka's forces, surrounding them with superior speed and tactics. Realizing his hopeless position, Jamuka surrendered. Tradition demanded that Jamuka be executed, but Temujin, now a true leader, offered him mercy, a chance to join him in ruling the Mongols. Jamuka refused, preferring death to submission. With his old rival gone, Temujin now stood unchallenged as the supreme leader of the Mongols, and in 1206, he took the title that would echo through history, Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The birth of an empire, with the Mongol tribes finally united under his rule, Genghis Khan turned his eyes beyond Mongolia. The world had never seen anything like him, a leader forged in hardship, a warrior unmatched in battle, a ruler who had reshaped Mongol society, turning scattered clans into a disciplined, unstoppable army. And now he was ready to unleash that army upon the world. But how did Genghis Khan transform a nation of nomads into an empire of conquerors? And how did the mighty Chinese dynasties react to this rising threat from the steppes? By 1206, the Mongol tribes were united under Genghis Khan, the first time in history that the warring clans of the steppes had one ruler. But Genghis Khan was not content with just Mongolia. He believed in a destiny greater than the steppes. His warriors were restless, eager for new lands, wealth and glory. To the south, the vast and powerful Chinese dynasties ruled in luxury. To the west, the Islamic world and the Silk Road promised riches beyond imagination. The world did not yet fear the Mongols, but soon they would. But Genghis Khan's next war would be different. His enemy was far greater, and far richer than anything the Mongols had ever faced before. To the south, the Tenggit Empire of Western Xia controlled trade routes and fertile lands. The Tenggits were wealthy, organized and militarily strong. Their fortified cities were defended by massive walls, something the Mongols had never had to deal with before. They believed the steppe warriors were just another band of raiders, easily defeated. Like so many before, they were wrong. The first Mongol siege, conquering Western Xia, 1207-1210. For the Mongols, siege warfare was a new challenge. They were masters of cavalry, open field battles and ambushes, but they had no siege weapons to break city walls. So how did Genghis Khan conquer the Tenggit? First, he surrounded their cities, cutting off all supplies and reinforcements. He sent his warriors to block roads and rivers, starving the population inside. The Mongols would wait weeks or even months, knowing that hunger would force the defenders to surrender. But if starvation alone didn't work, Genghis Khan had another strategy. The Mongols would fake a retreat, a tactic they had perfected. The Tenggits, believing they had won, would leave their fortresses to pursue the fleeing Mongol. The Mongols would turn around suddenly, slaughtering their overconfident enemies in open battle. City after city fell. By 1210, the Tenggits, seeing their armies broken, surrendered to Genghis Khan. They became a vassal state, agreeing to pay annual tribute in wealth, supplies and troops. For the Mongols, this was their first great victory over a powerful civilization. But Genghis Khan was only getting started. The invasion of the Yuan Dynasty, 1211-1215. After defeating the Tenggits, Genghis Khan turned his attention to China's greatest power, the Yuan Dynasty. The Jin ruled northern China, home to rich cities, vast farmlands, and millions of people. They had an army of hundreds of thousands, fortified cities, and an economy far more advanced than the Mongols. but Genghis Khan had a plan. In 1211, he gathered 90,000 Mongol warriors, the largest army Mongolia had ever seen. He divided his forces into multiple smaller armies, each moving independently and attacking from different directions. The Jin had fortresses, but Genghis Khan forced them into open battle, where Mongol cavalry could easily overwhelm them. The Mongols burned farmland, cut off supply routes, and terrorized the countryside. The Yuan Dynasty's greatest mistake was believing that they could simply hide behind their city walls. By 1215, the Mongols had reached the Jin capital of Zhengdu, modern-day Beijing. Its 12-meter-high walls made a direct assault impossible, but the Mongols had learned from captured Chinese engineers how to build siege weapons. They used catapults to launch flaming projectiles over the walls. They built ladders and towers to scale the defenses. They dug tunnels under the walls to weaken them. After months of siege, the defenders of Zhengdu could no longer hold out. When the Mongols finally broke through, they showed no mercy. Tens of thousands were slaughtered. The city was burned to the ground. The Jin emperor fled south, abandoning his people. With the fall of Beijing, Genghis Khan had proven that the Mongols could conquer great cities, but he was still not finished. The Mongols turned west. Genghis Khan sent emissaries to the Khwarezmian Empire, a powerful Muslim kingdom that controlled Persia and Central Asia. His message was simple: we wish to trade, not to fight. But the Shah of Khwarezm made a fatal mistake. He killed Genghis Khan's emissaries, seeing the Mongols as mere barbarians. To Genghis Khan, this was the ultimate insult, an act of war. His response was swift and brutal. In 1219, Genghis Khan led 200,000 warriors across the deserts and mountains of Central Asia. His target, the rich cities of Samarkand, Bukhara and Nishapur, the heart of the Khwarezmian Empire. The Mongols showed no mercy. Cities that resisted were completely destroyed. Populations were slaughtered as a warning to others. Cities that surrendered were spared and placed under Mongol rule. By 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire no longer existed. The Mongols had erased an entire kingdom from the map. It was at this moment that the world realized the Mongols were unlike any enemy before. The Mongols invade the west. By 1221, Genghis Khan had conquered China's north, destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire, and controlled vast trade routes across Asia. But his ambition was not satisfied. To the west, the powerful Islamic caliphates, the rich cities of Eastern Europe, and the mighty kingdoms of Russia stood in the Mongols' path. Genghis Khan was not content with just ruling Asia. He wanted to break the strongest empires in the world. He wanted revenge for the insult dealt to his emissaries, and he wanted to prove that no force could stand against the Mongols. The aftermath of the Khwarezmian War, 1221, the Mongols had completely destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire. Cities razed to the ground, populations wiped out. The once mighty empire ceased to exist, but the Mongols were not finished. Genghis Khan sent his two greatest generals, Subutai and Jibei, on a bold mission. Their orders: explore the lands beyond Khwarezm, scout the lands of Persia, the Caucasus, and Russia. If resistance is found, crush it. This would be one of the most daring and brutal Mongol campaigns yet. The Mongol invasion of Persia, 1221-1223. The Mongols swept into Persia, determined to secure their western frontier. Persia's last remaining forces made a stand, but they were no match for Mongol tactics. The Mongols split their forces into multiple attack groups, hitting Persian cities simultaneously. Any city that resisted was completely destroyed. Any city that surrendered was spared but forced to pay tribute. The Mongols learned new tactics from Persian engineers. Siege weapons became more advanced. Persian administrators were captured and forced to govern the new Mongol territories. By 1223, Persia was firmly under Mongol control, but the Mongols were not done yet. The rich lands of Eastern Europe were next. The Mongols crossed the Caucasus, 1222-1223. After conquering Persia, the Mongols turned northwest, entering the Caucasus Mountain. There they encountered fierce resistance from the Kingdom of Georgia and the Alans, a warrior people from the highlands. The Mongols deployed their signature strategy. They sent envoys to the Alans, offering an alliance against the Georgians. When the Alans agreed, the Mongols defeated the Georgians first, then they betrayed the Alans, turning on them and slaughtering their armies. This was a lesson to all Mongol enemies: never trust a Mongol peace offer. With the Caucasus under their control,
the Mongols moved into Russia. They would now face the mighty Kievan Rus and their legendary warriors. The Mongols versus Kievan Rus, 12023. The Mongols entered the steppes of modern Ukraine, where they met the Kievan Rus princes. The Rus were a collection of Slavic principalities, each ruled by a prince. Their warriors were heavily armored, elite knights, similar to Western European crusaders. They fought on foot and horseback, believing their strength in numbers would overwhelm any enemy. The Rus underestimated the Mongols. They assumed the Mongols were just another steppe tribe. They were wrong. At the Battle of the Kaka River 12023, the Mongols used a classic trick. They faked a retreat, luring the Rus knights into a long pursuit. After several days of chasing, the Rus knights were exhausted. Suddenly the Mongols turned and surrounded them. It was a massacre. The Mongols cut down thousands of Rus warriors. The princes were captured and executed in brutal fashion. For the first time, Europe saw the full might of the Mongol war machine. But this was only a scouting mission. The real Mongol invasion of Russia would come later. For now, the Mongols turned back east to report their success to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan's final campaign, 12026-12027, as his generals waged war in the west, Genghis Khan turned his focus back to China. The Western Jia, the Tangut state that had once submitted to him, had stopped paying tribute. This was unacceptable. In 12026, Genghis Khan led one final invasion of Western Jia. The Mongols stormed city after city, executing those who resisted. Genghis Khan vowed to wipe Western Jia from history itself. In 12027, the Mongols captured the last Western Jia stronghold. The entire population was eradicated. The Tangut people, their rulers, and their culture were erased from history. But during the campaign, Genghis Khan fell ill. Some accounts say he was thrown from his horse. Others claim he was wounded in battle. Regardless, by August 12027, the great Khan lay dying. Before his death, he gave one final order: continue the conquests, expand the empire, make the world tremble. Genghis Khan, the man who united the Mongols and built the greatest empire of his time, was gone, but his sons and generals would continue his legacy. The Mongol conquests were far from over. The Mongols invade Europe. By 12027, the Mongol Empire was already the largest land empire the world had ever seen. China's north lay in ruins. Persia had been crushed. The Mongols had already tested the strength of the Russian princes. But now, under the rule of Genghis Khan, the Mongols turned their attention westward, toward the heart of Europe. Their armies would soon shake the foundations of Christendom. This is the story of how the Mongols invaded and devastated Europe, bringing terror to kingdoms that had never even heard their name before. Genghis Khan takes control, 12029. With Genghis Khan's death in 12027, the Mongol Empire needed a new leader. A great Mongol Kurultai council was called, and Genghis Khan's third son Genghis was chosen as the Great Khan. Genghis was not a warrior like his father. He was a master administrator. He focused on organizing the Mongol Empire, ensuring that the vast territories stayed under control. He expanded trade, infrastructure, and taxation systems. But Genghis also had one clear priority: the conquest of Europe. He would continue his father's expansion, sending the Mongol armies further west than ever before. And so, a new Mongol invasion was prepared. The Mongols returned to Russia. First target of Genghis Khan's European campaign was the lands of Kievan Rus, modern Russia, Ukraine and Belarus. The Mongols had already defeated the Rus once at the Battle of the Kaka River, but now they would return in full force, led by the terrifying general Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan. Batu Khan's invasion of Russia began in 12027. The Mongols advanced during winter, something no army had ever done before. They used frozen rivers as roads, moving with incredible speed. Their armies were larger, better armed, and more organized than before. The Russian princes were divided and weak, making it easy for the Mongols to pick them off one by one. In December 12027, the Mongols attacked the city of Ryazan. They burned it to the ground. The population was massacred. No mercy was given. One by one, the major cities of Kievan Rus fell. The great city of the Rus was obliterated, with nearly all its inhabitants killed. By 12020, the Mongols had completely conquered Russia, but this was only the beginning. Their real objective was Europe itself. The Mongols strike Poland and Hungary. By 12021, the Mongols were ready to invade the heart of Europe. They split into two massive armies. One army, led by Batu Khan, would invade Hungary. Another, led by Baibadar and Khadan, would attack Poland. The Battle of Legnica, April. Poland falls. The first European kingdom to resist the Mongols was Poland. Duke Henry II of Silesia assembled an army to stop them. His force included Polish Knights, Teutonic Knights, a famous crusading order, Templars and Hospitallers. They met the Mongols at the Battle of Legnica. The result, a disaster for Europe. The Mongols used their classic feigned retreat, tricking the knights into breaking formation. Once the Polish knights were separated and tired, the Mongols encircled and annihilated them. Duke Henry II was beheaded, and his head was displayed on a Mongol spear. The Mongols had crushed Poland. Now they turned toward Hungary. The Battle of Muhi, Hungary's doomed King Bela IV of Hungary had been warned about the Mongols, but he refused to believe they were a real threat. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. The Mongols crossed the frozen Carpathian Mountains in winter. They moved faster than any European army had ever seen. When the Hungarian army finally engaged them at the Battle of Muhi, the Mongols unleashed hell. The Hungarians were completely destroyed. The Mongols used smoke screens and ambush tactics, confusing the Hungarians. Their superior mobility allowed them to fire arrows from all sides. The Hungarian army was trapped on a riverbank and slaughtered. King Bela IV barely escaped with his life. Hungary was devastated. Towns were burned. Villages wiped out. Europe had never seen anything like this before.
The Mongols reached the edge of Europe 142. After destroying Hungary and Poland, the Mongols prepared to march into Austria and Germany. There was nothing stopping them. The Holy Roman Empire was in chaos. The French and English were fighting each other. No European army was strong enough to stop Batu Khan. But then, something unexpected happened. In 1242, Ögedei Khan died in Mongolia. According to Mongol law, all Mongol leaders had to return home to elect a new great Khan. Batu Khan was forced to stop his campaign. The Mongols retreated from Europe, never reaching the Atlantic. Europe had narrowly escaped total destruction. Had Ögedei Khan lived just a few more years, the Mongols might have conquered all of Western Europe, but their empire was now in political chaos. For the first time, the Mongols stopped expanding. The Mongols conquered the Middle East by the mid-13th century. The Mongol Empire had already shaken Europe to its core. Russia had fallen. Poland and Hungary were devastated. Western Europe had barely escaped destruction. But while Batu Khan's armies had ravaged Eastern Europe, another Mongol force turned its attention southward toward the Islamic world. This would become one of the most brutal and devastating campaigns in history. The Siege of Baghdad, 1258, the end of the Islamic Golden Age. By the mid-13th century, Baghdad was the most advanced city in the Islamic world. It was the center of learning, trade, and culture. It had the great house of wisdom, where scholars studied science, medicine, and philosophy. The Abbasid Caliphate, which had ruled for over 500 years, was headquartered in the city, but the Mongols were coming, led by Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan. Hulagu was ordered to destroy the Abbasid Caliphate and bring Baghdad to its knees. The siege begins January 1258. Hulagu arrived with an army of 150,000 Mongols, including Persian and Chinese engineers. They surrounded Baghdad and began a relentless 40-day bombardment. Siege weapons smashed the city walls. Bridges and towers collapsed under Mongol attacks. No reinforcements came to help the Caliph. When the walls finally fell, Hulagu ordered the total destruction of Baghdad. The massacre of Baghdad. For 1 week the Mongols massacred the entire population. Men, women and children were slaughtered without mercy. Palaces, mosques, and libraries were burned. The House of Wisdom, containing centuries of Islamic knowledge, was destroyed forever. Legend says that the Tigris River ran black, not with blood but with ink, as thousands of books were thrown into the river. The Caliph al-Mustasim was captured and executed. Some sources claim that Hulagu had him wrapped in a carpet and trampled to death by horse. Baghdad, once the greatest city in the Islamic world, was reduced to rubble. The Mongols had ended the Abbasid Caliphate, but they were not finished yet. The Mongols invade Syria, 1260. After destroying Baghdad, the Mongols turned westward. Their next target was Syria, ruled by the Ayyubid dynasty, the successors of Saladin. One by one the great cities of Syria fell to the Mongols. Aleppo was burned. Damascus, the jewel of Syria, surrendered without a fight. The Mongols now stood on the doorstep of Egypt. The world believed nothing could stop them. But then, something unexpected happened. For the first time, the Mongols were about to face an enemy that could resist them. The Battle of Ain Jalut, 1260. The Mongols are defeated in 1260. The Mongols were unstoppable. But then, news arrived from Mongolia. The great Khan Mongol had died. As Mongol tradition demanded, Hulagu Khan had to return home to elect a new leader. He left behind only a small force to hold Syria, but the Mamluks of Egypt, a powerful military elite, saw their chance. Led by Sultan Qutuz and the great general Baybars, the Mamluks prepared to fight. On September 3, 1260, the two armies met at Ain Jalut, in modern-day Palestine. How the Mamluks defeated the Mongols. The Mongols were confident, believing that no army could resist them. But the Mamluks had learned their tactics and used them against them. They faked a retreat, luring the Mongols into an ambush. Hidden Mamluk cavalry attacked from the sides, cutting off their retreat. The Mongols were surrounded and annihilated. For the first time in history, the Mongols had been decisively defeated. The Battle of Ain Jalut marked the beginning of the end of Mongol expansion into the Middle East. The Mamluks had saved Islam from total destruction. The Mongols conquered China, the Yuan Dynasty. For over 50 years the Mongols had swept across Eurasia, leaving behind a trail of devastation. The Khwarezmian Empire was annihilated. Baghdad and the Abbasid Caliphate were destroyed. The Mongols had reached the gates of Europe and the Middle East, but despite their unmatched conquests, one final challenge remained: China, a vast and heavily fortified land, ruled by one of the most advanced civilizations in history, protected by thousands of walled cities, ruled by the powerful Song dynasty in the south, and filled with riches, scholars and military engineers. The Mongols had already conquered northern China, but southern China remained defiant. This would be the Mongols' longest and most difficult war, and by the end of it China itself would never be the same again. The first Mongol invasions of China, before Genghis Khan died in 1227, the Mongols had already invaded parts of China. In 1211, the Mongols attacked the Jin dynasty, which ruled northern China. By 1215 they had captured Beijing, but the Jin dynasty held out for another 20 years. But finally in 1234, the last Jin emperor was defeated. Now the Mongols controlled northern China, but the Song dynasty in the south remained a powerful force, and conquering them would not be easy. The Song dynasty had one of the largest armies in the world. They were experts in naval warfare, controlling China's rivers. Their cities were fortified and well defended. For the next 40 years the Mongols would struggle to break the Song dynasty. The man who would finally complete the conquest of China was Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan and the Yuan Dynasty. By 1260 Kublai Khan had risen to lead the Mongol Empire. Unlike his predecessors, he was not just a warrior, he was highly intelligent. He admired Chinese culture. He believed that the Mongols should rule as Chinese emperors, not just conquerors. But first, he needed to defeat the Song dynasty once and for all. This war would last 20 years, and it would lead to the greatest naval battle in Mongol history. The fall of the Song dynasty, 1268-1279. The siege of Xianyang, 1268-1273, breaking the Song defenses. For 5 years the Mongols laid siege to the fortress city of Xianyang. The Song defenders had powerful catapults and warships. Mongol cavalry could not break through the city walls. But Kublai Khan used new tactics. He hired Persian and Arab engineers to build giant siege weapons. He deployed massive trebuchets, capable of hurling huge boulders over city walls. After 5 years the Song finally surrendered in 1273. With Xianyang defeated, the Mongols could now march into the heart of China. The naval battle of Yamen, 1279, the Song's last stand. In 1279, the last forces of the Song dynasty retreated to the sea. They gathered their fleet of 1,000 warships in the South China Sea. The Mongols had never fought a full-scale naval battle before.
But Kublai Khan adapted again. The Mongols built their own fleet. They hunted down the Song ships one by one. In the final battle at Yamen, the Mongols burned the Song fleet, trapping them against the shore. The last Song emperor, a young boy, was taken by his loyal minister. Realizing there was no escape, the minister jumped into the sea with the boy in his arms. They drowned together, marking the official end of the Song dynasty. For the first time in history, all of China was under Mongol rule. The rule of the Yuan Dynasty, 1271–1368. After conquering China, Kublai Khan declared himself emperor and established the Yuan Dynasty. The Mongols adopted many Chinese customs. They made Beijing the capital of China. Kublai Khan welcomed foreign merchants, including the famous Marco Polo, but Mongol rule in China was not without problems. Many Chinese resented Mongol rule. The Mongols had difficulty governing such a vast empire. Famine, corruption and internal rebellions grew stronger over time. By 1368, after nearly 100 years, the Chinese finally overthrew the Mongols. The Ming dynasty rose to power, and the Mongols were forced to retreat back to Mongolia. The Yuan dynasty was over, but despite their power, there were still places that resisted Mongol rule. Two great challenges lay ahead: the island nation of Japan, a land of fearless samurai warriors; Southeast Asia, with its jungles, rivers and tropical heat, a battlefield unlike any the Mongols had ever seen. The Mongols would soon face their greatest defeats, and it would mark the beginning of their downfall. Kublai Khan's dream, the invasion of Japan, 1274 and 1281. Kublai Khan had conquered China, but he wanted more to the east. Across the Sea of Japan lay a small but proud kingdom. Japan was ruled by the Kamakura shogunate, a government led by powerful samurai. It had never been conquered by an outside force. The Mongols demanded Japan's submission, but Japan refused. Kublai Khan was not a man to take rejection lightly. He prepared an invasion fleet. Japan would soon face the full force of the Mongol war machine. The first Mongol invasion, 1274, Kublai Khan sent 900 ships carrying 30,000 Mongol, Chinese and Korean soldiers. The Mongols landed in Kyushu, southern Japan, and attacked the samurai defenders. The samurai were not prepared for Mongol tactics. They had never fought against coordinated cavalry, archers and explosive weapons. But just as victory seemed certain for the Mongols, disaster struck. A violent storm suddenly hit the Mongol fleet. Hundreds of ships were destroyed, and thousands of Mongol troops drowned in the sea. The surviving Mongols fled back to China, and Japan was saved. This storm would later be called kamikaze, meaning divine wind, a storm sent by the gods to protect Japan. The Second Mongol Invasion, 1281, the greatest naval battle in Mongol history. Kublai Khan was not willing to accept defeat. In 1281 he launched an even bigger invasion, this time with 4,400 ships, and over 100. It was the largest naval invasion in world history, until D-Day in 1944. The Mongols landed again in Kyushu, facing tens of thousands of samurai warriors. For weeks the Mongols fought the fierce samurai defenders, but once again, nature intervened. Another typhoon struck Japan, stronger than before. The Mongol fleet was shattered, tens of thousands of soldiers drowned in the storm. It was one of the greatest naval disasters in history. Japan was saved once again by the divine wind. The second kamikaze. Kublai Khan's dream of conquering Japan had failed. It was the beginning of Mongol decline, but Kublai still sought expansion elsewhere. His next target, Southeast Asia. The Mongols invade Vietnam, 1257–1288. Mongol armies had conquered China, Persia and Eastern Europe, but now they faced a new enemy, the kingdoms of Southeast Asia. These lands were tropical, covered in dense jungles and rivers. The heat, humidity and disease made it a nightmare for Mongol soldiers. Unlike the open plains of Mongolia, the Mongols could not rely on cavalry charges. Their first target, Vietnam. The first Mongol invasion of Vietnam, 1257–1258. In 1257, before Kublai Khan became emperor, the Mongols attacked Dai Viet, modern-day Vietnam. The Mongols captured the capital Thang Long, modern-day Hanoi, but Vietnamese guerrilla forces harassed the Mongols, cutting off their supplies, Within months, the Mongols were forced to retreat. The Vietnamese had used the jungle to their advantage, launching hit-and-run attacks. But Kublai Khan was not done. He would try 2 more times to conquer Vietnam. The second and third Mongol invasions, 12484, 12488. In 12484, Kublai Khan sent a massive invasion force into Vietnam. The Mongols again captured Thang Long, but the Vietnamese king used a brilliant strategy. He did not fight the Mongols directly. Instead, he retreated into the jungles. The Mongols struggled to survive in the unfamiliar terrain. Disease, starvation and guerrilla warfare weakened the Mongol army. In 12488, the Mongols tried to withdraw, but they were trapped. The Vietnamese blocked the Mongol fleet at the Battle of Bac Dang River. They planted wooden stakes in the river, which destroyed Mongol ships at high tide. Thousands of Mongol soldiers drowned. The Mongols were completely defeated. Kublai Khan never attempted to invade Vietnam again. The Mongols versus Java, a final disaster. After failing in Japan and Vietnam, Kublai Khan set his sights on Java, a powerful island kingdom in modern-day Indonesia. In 12480, the Mongols sent 20,000 troops to conquer Java. At first they seemed successful, defeating local forces, but the Javanese used guerrilla warfare, attacking supply lines and isolated Mongol units. Within a few months the Mongols were exhausted and demoralized. They retreated back to China, suffering heavy loss. Java had humiliated the Mongols, just like Japan and Vietnam. Kublai Khan's empire was now showing cracks. The Mongol invasion of India. The Mongols had conquered China, Persia, Russia and much of the Islamic world. They had defeated powerful armies, destroyed great cities and built the largest empire in history. But one region had escaped their grasp: India. India was a land of wealth, great cities and vast armies. It was ruled by the powerful Delhi Sultanate, an Islamic empire that controlled much of the subcontinent. But the Mongols wanted to expand further. They wanted India under their rule. For decades the Mongols launched invasion after invasion. But India was different. It was a land of brutal heat, deadly diseases, and fierce warriors. The first Mongol invasions of India. The Mongols first reached India. At the time the Mongols were chasing a Persian ruler, the last Shah of the Khwarezmian Empire. This ruler, Jalal ad-Din, fled into India to escape the Mongols. Genghis Khan followed with 20,000 men, crossing the Hindu Kush mountains, into what is now Pakistan. For the first time in history, Mongol armies stood at the gates of India. But Genghis Khan chose not to invade the subcontinent. India was hot and humid, completely different from the Mongol homelands. It was filled with dense jungles and great rivers, terrain difficult for cavalry. Genghis Khan decided not to risk his army and instead turned back toward Persia. But this was only the beginning. In the decades that followed, the Mongols would return again and again, trying to break into India. And soon a new Mongol leader would launch the largest attack yet. The Great Mongol Invasion of Delhi. By the late 13th century, the Mongols had a new ruler, Dawa Khan, the leader of the Chagatai Khanate. Dawa was one of the most aggressive Mongol leaders of his time. He saw India as a land of opportunity, a region rich in gold, jewels and trade routes. He launched the largest Mongol invasion of India ever attempted. A Mongol army of 200,000 soldiers rode toward Delhi, the capital of the Delhi Sultanate. The Mongols believed they would take the city easily, but India's ruler Sultan Alauddin Khilji had been preparing for years. He had built fortresses, trained a massive army, and created an advanced spy network. When the Mongols reached Delhi, they found a city that was completely fortified. Delhi's walls were too strong to break. The city had enough food and supplies to last for months. The heat and diseases of India began to weaken the Mongol force. After months of siege, the Mongols were forced to retreat. As they marched back toward the mountains, Alauddin Khilji sent his army to chase them down. The Delhi Sultanate crushed the Mongol invaders, killing thousands as they fled. The Mongols had never suffered such a defeat in India before, but they would return again, and their next attack would be even more brutal. The Mongol Massacre of 1306. In 1306, the Mongols returned with another massive invasion force. They launched a surprise attack, trying to overwhelm the Indian defenses. But this time, Alauddin Khilji was ready. He lured the Mongols into a trap, leading them into a battle in the mountains. The result was one of the worst Mongol defeats in history. The Mongols were surrounded and completely destroyed. Tens of thousands of Mongols were captured. Alauddin Khilji executed every single Mongol prisoner. For the first time in history, the Mongols had been completely wiped out in a single battle. India had resisted the greatest empire in the world. The Mongols would never again launch a major invasion of India. The Delhi Sultanate had achieved what so many others had failed to do. It had stopped the Mongols permanently. But before the Mongols disappeared from history, there would be one last great leader, one Mongol warrior who would rise from the ashes and build a new empire. Tamerlane, the last Mongol conqueror. The rise of Timur, 1336. Timur was born in 1336, in the city of Shahrazabs, in modern-day Uzbekistan. His family was part of the Turco-Mongol Barlas tribe, descendants of Mongol warriors. He grew up hearing stories of Genghis Khan, the greatest conqueror in history. He dreamed of rebuilding the Mongol Empire. But Timur was not born into royalty. He had to fight for power. He started as a local warlord, leading a small group of warriors. He slowly built alliances, defeating rival tribes one by one. By the time he was 30 years old, Timur had become the most powerful warlord in Central Asia. He took control of Samarkand, the wealthiest city in the region. He defeated Mongol, Persian and Turkish rulers, expanding his territory. By 1369, Timur had become the undisputed ruler of Central Asia. But Timur wanted more. He didn't just want to rule Central Asia, he wanted to rebuild the Mongol Empire. He began planning his first great campaign, a war of conquest that would shake the world.
The conquest of Persia 1370–1387. Timur turned his attention west, toward Persia, modern-day Iran. Persia had once been one of the richest and most powerful empires. But by the 14th century, it was divided and weak, ruled by rival warlords. Timur saw an opportunity. He would conquer Persia and make it part of his growing empire. In 1370, Timur launched his first great invasion. His armies stormed across Persia, defeating warlords and sultans. He used brutal tactics. If a city resisted, he destroyed it completely. By 1387, Timur had conquered all of Persia. But he didn't stop there. He invaded Iraq, Azerbaijan and Armenia, expanding his empire even further. By the late 1380s, Timur controlled all of Central Asia and Persia. He was now one of the most powerful rulers in the world. But his ambitions were far from over. He set his sights on a new target, the Mongol rulers of the Golden Horde. War with the Golden Horde, 1395–1396. The Golden Horde was one of the last great Mongol Khanates. It ruled over Russia, Ukraine and parts of Eastern Europe. But the Golden Horde's leader Tokhtamesh had challenged Timur's rule. Timur decided to destroy him completely. In 1395, Timur marched north with an army of over 200,000 warriors. The Mongols of the Golden Horde tried to stop him, but Timur's tactics were too advanced. His army used speed, deception, and brutal shock tactics. He burned cities, slaughtered armies, and crushed Tokhtamesh's forces. The Golden Horde never recovered. Russia was now free from Mongol rule. Timur had proven himself as the most powerful Mongol warlord. But he still had one final challenge: a war against the greatest empire of his time. His next target, the Ottoman Empire led by the legendary Sultan Bayezid I. The Battle of Ankara, 1402. The Ottoman Empire was the rising superpower of the 15th century. It had conquered the Balkans, Greece and parts of Eastern Europe. Its leader Sultan Bayezid I was known as the Thunderbolt, one of the greatest military commanders of his time. The Ottomans were preparing to invade Europe. But first, they had to deal with Timur. In 1402, Timur and Bayezid's armies met on the battlefield at Ankara. The Ottomans had over 100,000 elite soldiers. But Timur had a secret weapon. He had convinced the Ottoman cavalry to switch sides. As the battle began, Timur's cavalry encircled Bayezid's forces, cutting them off from reinforcements. The result, the Ottoman army was crushed. Bayezid was captured, becoming the only Ottoman sultan to ever be taken prisoner. Timur had defeated the most powerful empire of his time. But Timur wasn't finished yet. He had one final goal: to conquer China and reunite the Mongol Empire. The final campaign, the invasion of China, 1404–1405. By 1404, Timur was over 68 years old, but he still dreamed of one last conquest. He wanted to march east and defeat the Ming dynasty in China. If he succeeded, he would restore the Mongol Empire to its former glory. He gathered an army of 200,000 men and began the long march to China. But Timur would never reach his destination. In the winter of 1405, as he was preparing to cross the mountains, Timur fell ill. He died in his tent just before reaching the Chinese border. With his death, his empire began to fall apart. Timur had built an empire as great as the Mongols of old. He had defeated Persia, Russia, and the Ottomans. He had conquered lands from India to the Middle East, but without him his empire collapsed within a few decades. Timur was the last great Mongol conqueror. With his death, the age of Mongol expansion came to an end. The Mongols would never again rule the world, but their legacy would live on in history, in culture, and in the warriors who followed in their footsteps. This was the final chapter of the Mongol conquests. But what happened to the lands they ruled? The legacy of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire began to crumble after the death of Kublai Khan in 1294. After his death, the empire split into 4 separate khanates: the Yuan Dynasty in China, the Ul Khanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Golden Horde in Russia. Each khanate had its own ruler, its own ambitions, and its own problem. The Yuan dynasty was overthrown in 1368 by the Ming dynasty in China. The Ul Khanate collapsed in the early 14th century after economic crises and internal rebellions. The Golden Horde was defeated by the Russians in the 15th. The Chagatai Khanate fell apart due to constant infighting. By 1500 the Mongol Empire was gone. The Mongols had ruled the world for nearly 300 years. But in the end their empire was too big, too divided, and too unstable to survive. Yet, even though the Mongol Empire was gone, its impact would never be forgotten. The Mongols changed warfare forever. The Mongols were the greatest warriors of their time. They built the most powerful army the world had ever seen. Their tactics, weapons, and strategies transformed warfare forever. Here's how. Speed and mobility. The Mongols could move faster than any other army. They rode for days without stopping, covering more ground in a week than most armies could in a month. Hit-and-run tactics. They attacked, retreated, then attacked again, exhausting their enemies before delivering the final blow. Psychological warfare. The Mongols spread terror before the battle even began, forcing many cities to surrender without a fight. Adaptability. They learned new weapons and tactics from every civilization they conquered. The use of spies. The Mongols gathered intelligence before every battle, knowing their enemies' weaknesses before they even attacked. The Mongols set the standard for military strategy. Even centuries later, generals like Napoleon and Hitler studied Mongol tactics. Many of the greatest military victories in history were inspired by Mongol warfare. The Mongols shaped the modern world. The Mongols didn't just destroy cities, they built new ones. They created a global network of trade, diplomacy, and culture. They connected the East and the West in ways that had never been done before. They helped spread knowledge, technology, and even diseases across continents. Here's how the Mongols shaped the modern world. The Silk Road flourished. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road became safer than ever before, allowing trade to expand between China, the Middle East, and Europe. The spread of ideas. The Mongols encouraged cultural exchange, helping to spread knowledge, science, and medicine across Asia and Europe. Religious tolerance. The Mongols allowed freedom of religion in their empire, which helped preserve diverse traditions. New government systems. Many Mongol-ruled territories adopted Mongol-style administration, shaping the future of modern states. Without the Mongols, the world would look very different today. The Mongols and Europe. When the Mongols invaded Europe, they changed it forever. In the 1200s, the Mongols destroyed entire kingdoms in Russia, Poland, and Hungary. But they also forced Europe to innovate. After the Mongol invasions, European armies adopted new military tactics to defend against future attacks. Trade between Europe and Asia expanded, bringing new goods, ideas, and technologies. The Mongols indirectly helped spark the Renaissance by connecting Europe with knowledge from the Islamic world and China. Even though the Mongols never fully conquered Europe, they transformed it from the outside. The fall of the Mongols led to the rise of Russia and China. After the fall of the Mongols, two great powers emerged. Russia. The Mongols had ruled Russia for 50 years. But when the Russians finally defeated them, they became stronger than ever. The city of Moscow grew into a powerful capital, leading to the rise of the Russian Empire. Thus China.
After overthrowing the Mongols, the Ming dynasty restored Chinese rule, leading to one of China's greatest eras. In many ways, the Mongol Empire's destruction gave birth to modern superpower. Without Mongol rule, Russia and China might not have become global giants. The Mongols and the Black Death. The Mongols didn't just spread trade and ideas, they also spread disease. In the 1300s, Mongol armies brought the bubonic plague from China to Europe. This plague became the Black Death, killing over 25 million people in Europe. It was one of the deadliest pandemics in history. The Mongols connected the world, but in doing so, they spread one of history's greatest disasters. The Mongols in modern culture. Even today, the Mongols are legendary. Genghis Khan is one of the most famous leaders in history. The Mongol conquests are studied in military academies worldwide. Films, books and TV shows still tell the stories of the Mongol warrior. But the real question is, were the Mongols barbarians or visionaries? Were they destroyers or creators? The truth is, they were both. They destroyed empires but built new ones. They spread terror but also spread knowledge. They ruled with violence but also with strategy. The Mongols shaped history in a way few others ever have. The lasting impact of the Mongols. The Mongol Empire rose from the steppes of Mongolia. It conquered the greatest civilizations of its time. It changed the world in ways still felt today. Even though the empire is long gone, its influence remains. Every time we study military history, global trade or cultural exchange, we see the Mongols' impact. Every time we look at the modern world map, we see nations that exist because of Mongol history. The Mongols may no longer rule the world, but their legacy will never be forgotten.